Hi everyone, this is Tommy from Studio Ultra Mega with another Operation Battle Ready tutorial. Episode 41, Painting White with Scale Color Artist Paints.
Okay everybody, so today we're going to talk about white and doing things other than just doing a flat white, you know, shading white and having it look smooth on a model. I want to show you a lot of these subtle blends that you use and, you know, these subtle colors here when shading white, and I want it to show up, so I'm not going to do it on a model. I'm going to do the gradients out on the wet palette. On a model that you have primed black, by the way, and you need to white out an area, this is what I use. I don't actually use white. I use Reaper Misty Gray. This color is super white unless it's next to white. Even compared to these color bands, you can see. It's just about the lightest gray you can be and not be white. It is very opaque. It covers well. Two thin coats should smoothly white out an area, and it's far less grainy than most white paints. Okay, so now I'm going to set out these colors. We can go ahead and talk about them a little bit first. These are all the Scale Color Artist Tube acrylics. Picked up a set and absolutely loving them. They are my new way. So we've got a number of great pastels that we can use to shade our whites. And we're going to start putting them out on the palette, and then we'll add the white at the end. Okay, the first thing I'm going to put out is what I would use for a neutral white. Okay, and this is Pearl Gray, which is just a skosh darker than the Reaper Misty Gray. Beyond that, if we're going to do warm or cool whites, we'll cover the warm ones first. You can set out some of this off-white, which is very much a nice ivory tone, and then we can put out some of this vanilla white, which is like a very bright ivory. Now we get to cool tones that we'll want to do, and a lot of times you want to do cool whites for things like armor. The warm whites are good for linens. First color we're going to put out is this beautiful violet gray. Look at that, there's just a little bit of, really that's a periwinkle. That's exactly what that color is. Tattoo artist peeps out there. Periwinkle, right? Okay, then this is Arctic Blue. And then finally we're going to put out Pastel Green. This one's an experiment. I have no idea how it would look blended into whites. Now I'm going to put out some dollops of white for us to do blends with. Great thing about these tube acrylics is there's so little waste. I mean, these tubes are like $7 a piece. But really, to get a lot of working time out of this on your wet palette, all you need to do is just give it a little dab onto the palette. You don't have to replace it till it runs out. It's, I don't know, like, you don't lose anything in dropper nozzles. You know, it's not going to dry out like GW paints. Okay, so if we're going to paint white, we're going to start with the whited out surface, whether that's white primer or we've whited it out with our Reaper Misty Gray. And then, for example, on a neutral gray, and I'm going to bring this up. This is the thinner that comes with the Scale Color Paint full set, and it's useful. I don't know, I know it's for airbrush, but I like to thin out paints on my palette with it as well. So just off camera I'm going to have, actually I'll throw this up on here so we can kind of see when I hit it. Okay, so I'm going to hit a little bit of the thinner and start thinning out this white. Scale Color white is very nice. Like, it doesn't grain up like a lot of whites out there. And look at that, even with all that thinner in it. I'm going to go ahead and get some of the water out of there. And I may adjust the light. I'm going to come over here and pull some of that away. Take the excess paint off the brush, but I'm not worried about it being super clean right now. I'll dip it back in the thinner. Start thinning out this pearl gray, which is our neutral gray. And start blending that into the white. I'm going to adjust the lighting here to see if I can get that to be clearer for you. This is exactly why I didn't want to do this on a model. Okay, now that's a little dim, but that's going to be our clearest so you can see all this white, these white blends happening. Okay, and the smoother you get your gradient before you start using it, the more useful to you. Okay, so there's a gradient that we've got. You can even come in, bend to the pure. Now, if I'm gonna paint a white piece of armor, like Stormtrooper armor, which they, is always very neutral white. It's never portrayed as like a cool white. I'm going to take those base color from like right here, right in the middle between this pastel gray and this white. And then you're going to lay, you would lay that in on your model and then start to move up the gradient and add them in. I mean, obviously we're not going to get layering in on this wet surface, but I wanted to make sure that you understood how these colors, how subtle these end up being. We've got these, a lot of people have trouble shading white, and we're shading white, we're starting with pastels, but we're not even going with pure pastels. We're doing like a 60-40 mix sometimes to start, okay? And then once you've painted your surface, if you're not getting dynamic shadows enough because of the way the piece is shaped or whatever, you can go down further on your wet palette and start to just kind of dab those in. You would clean off your brush again, and then where that meeting point is, you're just going to do soft dabs, and that's what's going to hide that transition color between those layers. Those sharp transition changes can look awful on white if you can't control them. Now if you were going to go for a linen color, again, we're going to dip into here, thin out some white for us, and then this is the off-white. There we go. It's a nice thin gradient. And again, on this one, we would probably start, this is a brighter pastel than this, so I would let it start a little more saturated, right? And then imagining that was something that could dry on the surface. We could add in shadows as needed. And now, if you were going to do a linen cloth that is on like heavy robes, right, like Sister of Battle, This may not even be a deep enough shadow for you. At which point you can use buff. I'm going to set out a little bit of buff. Buff is it's an ochre, but there's like no yellow in it. It's like kind of a pure khaki. I don't know if I'd ever take that paint straight to shade white, but if you take some of it and bring it into your gradient, there we go. That's a nice shadow color for some of those deep folds you could find in a lot of like Sisters of Battle robes and whatnot. This is the vanilla white, and we can mix that with white too. This is something that would be for very small, tight areas. We were trying to convey an ivory or linen aspect too, right? Notice all three of those can work. Like if you had a really large surface, and you have to be careful because the more you include this buff, the more it will look like bone, which might be what you're going for, but if it's not, don't use too much of that. Now we get into the cool colors. This is, make sure I'm calling it the right thing here, this is the violet gray. And we're going to start by thinning that out and bringing that color up into the gradient area. Look at that beautiful dot. Okay, now we're going to come over and bring in some of this white. This is probably my favorite way to do a cool white. Just enough gray in it to keep it from looking too plasticky. And if I were, and for most parts, for most general armor sections on Infinity models or whatnot, I'm going to start that shadow layer right here and then build the whites up on top of it. That's how you're going to get your highlights and whatnot. Just continuing to move up this gradient as layers dry. This Scale Color Artist Acrylics has a lot of working time, which is great for doing soft blends. It really allows for that technique of like soft dabs to like remove transition lines and that kind of thing. But then, once you have it the way you want it, you gotta leave it alone for a little bit. At least give it a solid 3-4 minutes. You don't want to go back into it with a brush because you're going to wake that paint right back up. Now we are going to try out this Arctic Blue, which is a very crisp, cool pastel. And this is something I would almost want to convey white as being very clean and new. Like I wouldn't use it for a stormtrooper in battle. I would use it maybe for a suit of armor right off the showroom floor. You see how those colors blend together real nice though. That is good looking. Bring in more white. Blend that down in. And yeah, I would probably be taking from this area for my initial shadow coat and then build my whites up on top for highlights. Now when you are doing this on a model, when you're doing this on a model, and you're building up these highlights, you're not really trying to stick too close to the edges, right? I mean, you guys, this is not my first video. You know how I build up my layers. So we are building up layers towards the final highlight. Those final white highlights you aren't going to do till that armor piece is very dry. You're going to take it from right here all the way up to here in a smooth transition on whatever piece you're painting. Then once it's fully dry, you can take some of this white from up here, which should be pure all the way at the end, and go ahead and do your hard lines, your glints, your hard edges, and that will give some very solid structure to to what usually ends up just looking flat and white on a model. Okay, now we're going to try this green. Kind of excited about this. Never really worked with a color like this, so I'll be curious to see how this gradient looks. Bring this up into here a little bit now. Well, this looks very elfin. This looks like if I was gonna do some civilian elves from Lord of the Rings, this would be a great kind of natural looking linen color. That's exciting. That makes me want to think of an army to apply that on. Maybe Sylvaneth. This is neat. This makes me want to paint elves. Alright, well this is a fun experiment. I'd like to see, I might end up trying to figure out a model just to put this on. But you see there we have an interesting white blend that's very soft and natural and has a little bit of a nature feel in there. But all of these work the same on a model. You're going to pick a spot on your whited out area, and you see it's usually about a third of the way up that gradient between the dark and the light. Our darks are all pastels to begin with, so our darks are very light. Okay, you build up those layers up this gradient, let the piece dry, come back and do your edge highlighting, and you will have some very dynamic pieces. If you try this method at all, get back to me, let me know how it works for you, and I will, on the Operation Battle Ready page, put up some painted examples where I can get full camera lights on it and not just this webcam. I'd like to take a moment now to thank all our patrons over at Patreon that make these videos possible, and watch out next month for the beginning of me doing paint-alongs with Marvel superheroes from the game Marvel Crisis Protocol by Atomic Mass Games.